Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, chers collègues et partenaires aussi, dear colleagues and partners, welcome to this second Data Science and AI for Public Good webinar. We are very, very pleased to welcome today Dr. Mats Norlund from AI Sweden. Mats, varmt välkommen. Vi är väldigt glada att ha dig här idag. Mats has a fantastically diverse international background, both in the industry and academia. He's an engineer by training. Mats, you've worked for Saab. You've also set up a management program at MIT. You've also been active in panels, both in Sweden and for the EU, among other things, for a panel that laid the ground for the European Research Council. But today you're going to tell us more about AI Sweden. You've been actively an active co-founder of AI Sweden together with the Swedish government and industry. AI Sweden is a national Swedish AI center, and you head their data factory. So over to you. I think you're going to tell us more about it. The floor is yours. Välkommen.
Well, tack så mycket. And dear colleagues, it's a great pleasure to be here and sharing some of the learnings that we've done here at AI Sweden. One of the most important learnings is probably how to handle webinars. Hopefully it works now. Can you see my screen now, Kerstin? It's all good? All right, thank you so much. Then I'll go ahead. So what I'm going to do is give you a bit of a quick introduction as to what is AI Sweden, so you know what is the platform I'm standing on right now. And then from there on, I'll take you on a little journey as to how we've been working with developing programs and initiatives in the area of AI for public good, and also share with you some of the examples of that. It's going to be somewhat a high level to give you a sense, and also some very concrete, very detailed, so you get to see how we actually do it. And feel free to send in questions through the Menti system that Kerstin has been setting up, and we'll address them here as we go. So now I will move on. So the purpose of setting up AI Sweden in the time we did it was to accelerate the use of AI for public good, essentially the benefit of the society, our competitiveness, and for people living here up in the Swedish area. AI Sweden today is a national center for applied AI, and it's a neutral, non-profit, and very broadly funded. It's a partnership, and we have locations in several different places here in Sweden and in Scandinavia, around the world. We actually have some in Montreal now. And it is involvement from both the private, public, and academic sectors in this system. We are hosted, and this is a little bit unusual, we are hosted by the science parks across Sweden, and that was a really good platform. We first looked at setting it up as part of a university, but it turns out that the universities compete with each other, and it was a little bit of a struggle there to figure out how to do that in a way that was of benefit to everybody. So what we found was to leverage the system of science parks that we have across the country. So we now have presence, meaning workplaces and access in all these different science parks. And we've also just now here in the last few months set up a location in Montreal because we wanted to collaborate with the ecosystem there, which is fantastically strong in many areas and complementary to what we do here. The partnership we have, we've grouped all the different partners. We have just over 110 today into 4 main areas: public sector, academia, private sector, startups, and big corporates. If we go in, you will see a number of big brand names, well-known brand names in the corporate side. We have a large number of universities, and also on the top left here, we'll see some of the example of that. Public sector, cities, government authorities, the regions here, which is the organizations that's responsible for the national healthcare system. And then we have all the AI-related startups that we also support to help get access to these bigger companies and to the public sector to develop their products and their services. So the key points of today's talk that I'm now going to move into is, first of all, what were the key challenges that we identified when we created AI Sweden to create an AI ecosystem for public good? And I'm actually going to start talking about very, very briefly, what is an ecosystem? Then once we have the key challenges, then illustrate how we have addressed them, and then at the end, sum it up by what are our key lessons learned. But looking at an ecosystem, I just took this illustration out of a recently published book by Ron Adner, which I thought illustrated it quite well. An ecosystem is a structure, and you always have one, by which partners or actors, stakeholders, interact to deliver some kind of value. It can be universities and industry, it could be companies to companies, or some other constellations. So no matter what, you have this. Sometimes it's very efficient and extremely good. Other times it's not really delivering what you would hope for. To do an ecosystem innovation, which is to go in and do something, if you're unhappy with your ecosystem, or if you just want to develop it over time, what you're looking at then at the ecosystem level is to go in and change the structure somehow, to look at how the interactions in the systems, are they good? Should we add some new component, or how do we actually make it perform better? That is essentially what an ecosystem innovation looks like. And at the schematic level, this is what it can look like. So you can, in this case, see that you've added a blue square above the light bulb that's coming new, and you eliminated the one that was on the far left. You can see it again here. One of them was eliminated, and all of a sudden we have a new ecosystem that should now deliver something differently, or even something completely different to what we were used to. So when we established AI Sweden, our task was pretty much to do an ecosystem innovation. And the reason for that was found in the key challenges that were identified at the starting point for AI Sweden. The government policy that was established here around 2016 or so, or early 2017, essentially summarized, said something that Sweden should be a leader in capitalizing the possibilities that using AI enables, with the purpose of strengthening national welfare and competitiveness. And that's in the report that I've just put up on the side here. And if you have a working ecosystem, you would expect the different actors in the country then to collaborate. You would see a exponential growth of outputs. For example, it could be research results, it could be startups, it could be application of AI in different areas. It could be patents, and you can pick any odd measure you want. Well, what we did was we asked one of the universities here, the university library, to go out and do a bibliometric study. And we took one indication of the activity and the performance. And what we looked at here, we looked at several different, but they were all more or less the same. This indicator here from 2017 was what is the number of publications that mentions deep learning, no matter what the application. And what you can see here is that on the left picture here, that China, of course, is because of the population and the investments in AI, is taking the lead worldwide here with about 600, almost 600 per year publications, and then followed by US, and then it's quite a big jump down to a number of other countries. And what I've done on the right here is I've magnified what you can see here, so you can then sort of look at the individual countries here. And you can see here Japan, the UK, and Switzerland. I pointed out here is the orange arrow, which was coming up here at about 30 per year at that time. And Sweden is down here. And what you could see is that the Swedish curve had not started with its exponential growth. And what was happening here is the ecosystem here was significantly lagging many other countries. And even if we started to do the same as was done in these other countries, we would have the same exponential growth, but we would still lag with the same amount of output. So the question we asked ourselves, can we create something here that make us run faster than everybody else so that we can catch up? So that was one of the challenges. How do we catch up that we kind of lost the ball a little bit here? The second one is the area of fear. How do we, because one of the things you can develop AI solutions, but how do you reduce the resistance to change? So that whether you're working with industry, with consumers out in the street, or if you're working with the public sector, how do you reduce the resistance to change so that you actually can capitalize on this new technology that's becoming available? So these were the two key challenges that we had. And of course, you can detail them and come up with a whole bunch of bigger, but at the top level, that's essentially it. And then the question is, how do we then address these challenges? And not least then starting off here with the speed. How do we run faster and catch up with the other ecosystems in Europe, in the US, in others? And of course, we didn't expect Sweden to be at the level 600 like China, but we should have a steeper incline of our curve. That's what the goal was. And the original idea we came up with here was to co-locate research in AI so algorithm development, model training, and so forth, with a data factory, which is where you work a lot with the data itself that you need to train, but also the infrastructure that you use to store all the data, to do all the computations you need. It's I used the analogy when we presented this here to the system you have around CERN in the Geneva area in Switzerland, where you have physicists working very closely with engineers, and the physicist says what they want in terms of experiments, and the engineers then have to build it. And they talk to each other, and they're located in the same place, and they can very quickly develop experiments and measure and do measurements that they are interested in. So we said, that's what we should do. We should have both of these in the same area. And back in 2017, we were not able to see any other country or any other location which had done that. Every other country we benchmarked had only done the research arena or research center focusing on the algorithms. But we said, let's do both. And that turned out to be a good move on us. The other thing we did was to say that this should be a national resource. We're not going to create a consulting or a research institute that does work for others. We're going to create a resource, a national resource. And the model we said here is that we want partners who come in here to invest together, and then, so from different sectors, it could be healthcare, it could be industry, it could be academia, they'll come here and we provide the environment, the working places, the infrastructure where they can work together to compare notes and learn from each other, and then propagate that out and share with many. So we realized early on that AI is not domain specific, but the solutions that you do, for example, in automotive, self-driving cars, computer vision, that could also apply in healthcare when you analyze X-ray images and things like that. So we saw the benefit of having very broad partnership and having different sectors talk to each other and provide that opportunity here at AI Sweden. So and then we asked ourselves, what is it in when you start up different big research projects and so forth that slows things down? And it turns out that one of the big issues that really slows down things is having to write all these agreements. So for example, it's expected you write non-disclosure agreement, that you write IP agreements, and some companies want special agreements and so forth. And we said, let's not do any of that. If we have a big partnership, let's have an open environment here so that they come here with pre-competitive questions. And let's not worry about IP because it just takes too much time, it's too much bureaucracy. And by the way, this technology is developing so fast that by the time you get a patent, it's probably obsolete anyway. And that has saved us a lot of time too. It was some skepticism in the beginning around this, but after a little while, some companies understood, and then the more that understood, the quicker it went. So we have now established that way of working, which really seems to work well. We have grouped what we do into 4 areas. It's partner networks and collaboration. The partner networks and collaboration is a center trying to address what I just described. You bring in people from medical side, with automotive, with space industry and others, and let them learn from each other and solve similar problems. We have a leadership and vision program to help companies and public organizations to train their leadership. How do you actually reduce this fear level? How do you implement, and how do you implement successfully? And we have knowledge and resources where we provide compute resources, we provide labs, and we can provide data sets. And we have a talent program, which I grayed out here, which I won't talk anything about today because it's essentially, you readily understand the idea that we sort of take young graduates, and we also take people from out of the country to come here and work here for various periods of time. We also allow people from industry and from the public sector to spend 6 to 24 months with us here. And work on projects together with others and learn. So it almost is like a professional program, but I'm not going to spend any more time on that right now, just to indicate that it is existing. So I'm going to talk about the other and start off with partner network and collaboration. And here, something that we did early on was to create, it seemed like a simple step, but it wasn't at the time, set up expert groups. And we started off in the legal space where we have a number of colleagues joining AI Sweden from the very beginning who had a law background, and they realized that we need to bring in corporate lawyers because the regulatory environment is changing so fast, and how the law is applied also is not completely clear. So what we saw is that companies, they benefited from having their corporate legal functions sitting together from many different industry, also together with the law firms, and discussing how do you see this, how do you apply this, have you heard of how this is applied in some other area, and so forth. And we said that the task for this group is to create a legal space for technical innovation, because otherwise what we found from the engineering side is that we would do something, we would build something, and then once it's built, we would get pushback from the legal side saying, well, you know, this is not allowed, there's the GDPR, there's something else, that, and then we would have to backtrack. So the idea was to create a space and say, okay, if you work in this space, we are essentially safe from bumping into any surprises from the legal structure. And what happened here recently was that the Swedish data protection agency called IMY, they actually have just joined this legal expert group. In the past, they were more of a monitoring authority that didn't want to get involved in proactive ways, but now they've changed that, and they are actually a very active part of this now. And they're going to send some people here to work with us on site here to learn more of what's needed and how does it really work, which is another sort of outcome that we couldn't really anticipate a year ago, but it's working out quite well. Another thing that's we started up about a year and actually a year and a half ago is this initiative called Future of Democracy. It's a very high-level summit annually discussing the future of democracy in light of what's happening in the digitalization area, and especially AI. And there's obviously a lot of news about this over the last 5-6 years, starting off with the election in the US in 2016, where there were clearly AI-based influences going on through Cambridge Analytica and other means. And since then, it's only escalated. So what you can see on this picture here is the former Prime Minister of Sweden, Carl Bildt. We had the President of Estonia as part of it, the Digitalization Minister of Norway, and the lady with the back turned to us here is one of the 12 commissioners from the US government, National Security Commission on AI. So we had a very, very good discussion. It's coming up again here next week. And if you're interested in these kind of issues, they have a website called futureofdemocracy.se, and they've captured the keynotes and discussions from last year. So it's not live streamed, but what they do is after the event, they'll post the key talks and everything else there. And if you want to join in the 2023 version, you can, of course, find ways to contact them there. So moving on to the next part here, which is vision leadership. One of the key things here is to reduce fear and also to maximize the way of success, so that you don't just end up with a proof of concept success all the time. And we have a group here headed by a very good person who came out of the consulting industry, who's been doing management consulting and so forth. And he set up an initiative here called AI Transformation, which is to help organizations to increase their AI maturity step by step. It's not sort of just the one thing where you just put the AI system in place and then let it run, but you really need to bring the organization along, everybody from management, so that they have the right expectation all the way to the people to work with. He uses this, which I think is a good analogy. This is one of the athletes here, Niels van der Poel, who won the skating championships this year here at the Olympics. And then he wrote a manual of how he would have trained to become an Olympic athlete if he could do it over. And his point was that if I'd had this manual when I started, it would have taken me 3 years to become the champion instead of 6. And that's essentially what we're trying to do here, is trying to, from the organizations that have successfully learned and applied AI, to write the manual that we can give to the other organizations that want to do the same journey so that they can do it faster. And this is sort of this concept of investing together and sharing with many. So this is sort of an inspiration for that. And the objectives here is to really work with the organization as a whole, work with individuals to make sure that they are all on board, and then connect into the ecosystem and leverage that so that we, as an organization, don't stand alone, but can actually interchange people, knowledge, and equipment and so forth to move forward. And we've also worked with a German organization who has a very good tool to do an AI maturity assessment so that the company can score itself on a number of criteria. And based on that, they can decide, okay, we need to work a little bit more in this field before, or this area before we go on to the next area, so that you have a balance as you make progress in the AI development in the company. And here is what it can look like from doing such a maturity assessment. So there's a number of questions that originally was developed by the Initiative for Applied AI in Germany, and then we've collaborated with them and so tailored it a little bit here to fit the purposes here. But it's a really good group. They are really knowledgeable, and I'm quite impressed by what they have done there. So you score yourself as a company on all these different cases, and you can see here how they've gotten scores from, let's say, management, production, and engineering, or it could be in a public sector, it could be the leadership, it could be customer facing, or it could be processing, or some other groups that one prefers to do. And you can see that in some cases, these groups are very tight. They all see the world the same, that in the area of organization, we are not doing so well. Whereas in ambition, you can see that the red dot has very high ambition, and there's a very large spread here, which is also telling. And that's also something they need to talk about in the organization. Where are we aiming here? Are we all having the same level of ambition and so forth? So, and then there are several tools and processes that's suggested to make this succeed. And that is, I think, a key thing to complement an ecosystem with. It's not just the development of the cool technology or the great solutions, but also a thought about how do you actually put this in place and how do you learn from each other. I'm going to move away from the area of leadership and vision now and go into the resource area, which was the third area I'm going to talk about. And here I'm going to give you a quick overview, but I'm also going to give you a very specific example here, a very concrete, detailed example of how we work with partners to put things in place. So in this data factory, which if you remember from my earlier slides, we had the center, which was focusing on the development of algorithms, and then we had the data factory, which is focusing on the data itself, but also the infrastructure to do storage and compute. And now I'm talking about this data factory, which is a unique aspect of the AI Sweden system at the time. So in the data factory, we decided to put in three main elements. It's a training environment, which is a standard, typical AI training, storage and compute solution infrastructure that you can see in many places around the world today. So we said we need something like that so that people who work here have access to it. It doesn't need to be the best or the biggest in the country. There are bigger investments in the academic sector and so forth, and people can access that too. But we needed to have something that's good enough. Then on the far right, you can see knowledge sharing. We run some of these expert groups. We have an infrastructure expert group where people who want to procure infrastructure or manage it can get together and learn from each other. How do you guys manage your infrastructure? What have you learned and what's working and what isn't? And then we said we'll do a third thing, which is a test bed. And the test bed, we said, it's something that the other parts of the country don't have. So we said we need to complement with the ecosystem here with something new. And the test bed is here to explore future or new novel data factory solutions. So I'm going to talk about that shortly, but here first, I'm just going to give you an example or two of the training environment. The first one where we just sort of use standard training solutions. This here is from Statistics Sweden, the National Statistics Agency, who realized that our data structures across the country wasn't really all that good for setting us up in a good way to completely make use of all the possibilities of AI. So they have gone together with us here as a platform, collaboration platform, and provide expertise together with the university to set up a template for data hubs where they can access the data from many, many different sources in a way that we can actually make a lot more use and learn a lot more about ourselves by having that available through the system. Another thing we've done here that's just come up now is also more or less of a standard solution for now, but it's also moving forward. That's a smarter city initiative, where one of the cities approached us here and wanted to develop a new test bed with other cities in Sweden where they can share data, but they want to share data, but legally they can't. So the question to us was, do you have a way where we can somehow legally share data that we can't send across? And that is also, we just built a simple demonstration unit that's on display down in that city now so that they can constructively discuss with other cities here and explain, here's how it works. We try to make it simple such that people can, who are not a specialist in AI, can understand the concept and understand how it works at a very general level and say, okay, this is interesting for us, or no, it's not interesting for us. And the ones who are interested can then get together, invest together, and then get some results and share them. So in the test bed system, the background for that was that we said that let's do something that's complementary to the other investments here. And whatever we do should have value both to people who want to use this to train algorithms, but also to the companies and organizations who actually developed this infrastructure. And we use this very simple model here saying that at AI Sweden, you get together, as I illustrated before, invest together. You have your engineers and lawyers or whoever wants to be in here and learn, and they work together to the interface between blue and yellow, which essentially is the level of a demonstrator or a prototype. That's as far as we can be here. Once they pass the demonstrator and the prototype, they know that it works. Then they can go into the commercial world and procure things and get commercial licenses and put it in place in the normal constructive or commercial way. So we would expect salespeople and procurement people out in the blue area, but no salespeople and no procurement people in the yellow area. And the specific thing we said that I'm going to give us a specific example now is how we developed the Edge Learning Lab. It has implications for public sector, which is also why I thought it's useful for you to see that. This is within the test facility or test bed of the data factory. So I will explain a little bit about the background, and where it came from was that this is how you traditionally train many of the AI models. There are some other ways you can train as well, but this is a very common way of doing it. You collect a lot of images. In this case, it's a drone collecting forest image. You get the trees from above. You can categorize and label them. So you don't take all the images, you pick some, you label it, and then you send it into a big storage and compute solution, and they do the calculations here, and you get your model. The quality of this model depends on how much data you had here and how good was it. And you generate huge quantities of data. So in the automotive industry, for example, one of the cars that's used there to generate data generates about 4 gigabits of data per second. The problem here is that with trees, maybe not so much, but if you go with cars, for example, you have privacy issues. You will take pictures on streets. There are people going to be there. There are going to be other cars with license plates, and you capture all that. So you run into GDPR issues. You run into other compliance questions. You have the Chinese flag here illustrates that some countries don't allow you to capture images in these countries and then send them out. So for example, the automotive industry cannot collect images in China and send them to Europe and train here. And due to GDPR, we can't collect images here and send to China either. So you run into issues like that. And of course, also the cities who might have patient files or some other personal data, so they can't share between themselves either. They have to keep it locally. We have other issues with no photography zones, and it costs a lot of money to store all this data, of course, and it takes time to transfer. So if you capture 4 gigabits per second, if you go out with one of our cars here for an hour, it can take you about a week if you want to transfer that data on traditional Ethernet cables. So we have to take the hard disks and actually physically move them. And then you have security issues, of course. So overall, this way here of training AI is perceived as not sustainable into the future. We can't just have the mindset of collect more and more data. So the industry and the public sector said, what do we want? And we want to have more data, of course, because the more data, the better. But at the same time, it has to be less. We want to share the data, but we have to keep it private. And we want to transfer this data, but we have to keep it local. So these are all paradoxes. And the question is, how do we deal with that? And the only way to think about it is to change the way that you ask your fundamental questions, and instead of looking at it in this way, saying, well, if we create the data on the edge, can we not keep it there? And if we say we want to aggregate the data, why don't we aggregate knowledge instead? And then once we got there, we found that Google had proposed something called federated learning in 2016. And that way, federated learning works in that you create your algorithm here, you send the algorithm out instead of sending the data in. So you send the algorithm out to your devices. It can be cars or cell phones or drones, and you train on these devices. And then you send back only the model parameters. So the data never leaves the edge, it just stays there, and then you can just get rid of it. Or you can have some other way that you have a connection of different devices like cars, which has a lot of compute power, and they don't even need a central location. They can just share it between themselves and learn that way. So conceptually, this is not so hard to understand, but the question is how you do it. How do you actually build it? How does it scale? How do you create this? And we built the lab. The partners actually built the lab here. So they came in with equipment for us, and we then helped out setting it up and making it available. And here you can see an image of several different companies working together. And we, to communicate how this works, we call it, it's a company or an organizational gym. So you pay your gym membership, and if you have your gym membership, you can come here and work out. And the more you come and work out, the quicker you build up your strength. And it's often more fun to go to the gym together with some friends than just go there alone. And so that's sort of a good mindset to have when you access it here. Here is some illustrations of how it can be applied in public sector area. This is an illustration where we built HPE, one of the partners here, built this use case involving 3 hospitals. They took these are fictitious hospitals. So the illustrator was saying that let's assume it's a hospital in Chicago, one in London, and one in Bangalore. And then they took a large publicly available X-ray data set, and they divided it into these 3 hospitals and said, okay, this hospital have a lot of data when it comes to these 3 lung issues, but not that many on this one. The one in London has these 2 quite well covered, but not that much data on this one, and so forth. And then they set up a federated learning environment and ran it. And this was the outcome here. You can see that first, just looking at it traditionally, the result was exactly as you can expect with the green lines here, that whatever they don't have much of, they don't have a very accurate model. But once they started to federate across, you could then see how this Chicago hospital all of a sudden had the performance, very high performance on what they really lacked data on, because they could also include parameters that came from the other hospitals. So this is essentially the idea, and this is also some of the earlier results that were discussed in this area. And since then, we have repeated this here for real, and this is an experiment that's been done here with a couple of different hospitals here in the Gothenburg area, where they looked at both synthetic data and also skin cancer data to see if we can federate between hospitals here. So that is more or less just repeating the experiment there to see that we understood how that was done. We had an approach from space. European Space Agency decided that this approach here of federating is a really good way to train on satellites. You don't have to send all the satellite data down to Earth for training purposes, but in fact to train the satellites, exchange parameters, and you train your AI there without having to take bandwidth just to send down training images, which is also a good thing. So the European Space Agency opened up PhilLab here to work exactly on edge learning for space. And the next step we're taking now is on this edge learning lab that we have, which is, as far as we know, the only one that's available. There are probably some companies who have something similar that they have behind their locked walls, but this, as far as we know, is the only one that's available for experiments for companies to come and try. We said, let's go from just having a lab to actually have a program where we aim to lead the development of this technology, so world leadership in this field. So we've used the lab as a platform. We have identified 3 starting areas: mobility, so we have private industry, we have space, which is public sector to some level, and then we have the health sector. So we have the 3 of them. And we picked them because they were the quickest to jump in here. And then we have cybersecurity. So we had an approach from the US, from one of the cyber labs there, saying that they'd really like to get involved here in understanding the cybersecurity issues that surrounds this. So they are contributing researchers for that. So we have a number of researchers from them here this summer, which is an excellent way to start a knowledge exchange between countries and between continents. So here is this is from the Mad Labs in the US. It's at South Dakota. So they have a very strong area in cyber operations, cybersecurity, and so forth. And they wanted to complement that with the application of this emerging type of technology. And it's really quite useful so that we don't, as many times happens, that you design some technical stuff and then as an afterthought you add cybersecurity. Now we're trying to put it in from the beginning. Finally, what I was going to talk about is a little bit about how we try to reach out to and how to make it available. So how do we share with many? And you are all included in many here. And we created here through AI Sweden a personal gateway, which we call My AI. So that's the web address there is my.ai.se. So you can register there and get your own account, and then you can go in and explore all sort of things that are very useful. And people keep adding very useful things as we go. And what you can see here are sort of categories, what can be done with AI and how people got there. If some companies needs AI competence, how somebody wants a collaborator, they might post that. Or there just could be some resources that are available, that here's a really good paper, here's some good code that you might want, or here's a good data set, or something like that, that can be available. And it's very easy, you just go in there and you sign up. And hopefully, I'm going to, I had some struggle with this before, so we'll see. I'm hoping to be able to screen share this with you. So I'm just going to ask you, can you see the My AI website right now?
I can, yeah.
Okay, good. So that worked. That's good. So for example, here you can go in. This is just a landing page here, and then there's some highlights and some resources available. But just as from the public sector, you can, for example, go in on the use cases here. And the use cases, they explain what kind of problems have people been working on, and what has worked, and how did they do it. And then you can go in here on filtering, and you can pick filters here, and you can select what you're interested in. So for example, if you're interested in municipalities or region, which is healthcare, but let's say take municipalities and regions, we will filter only for the use cases that apply there. And so now I'm just reloading it with that. And now you're getting an energy efficient buildings. We're getting combining different data sets for more insights. And you can go in here and read about and get inspirations for various types of use cases that can be done. And then you can see if it's implemented. This is a POC here, research. This here is actually implemented. It is quite an interesting student project that was done in the spring, how to catch illegal fishing that goes on in different places, and so forth. Some of this is in English, some in Swedish, but using some of the machine translation tools, it's not hard to even see the Swedish ones. So key points. The main challenges we had was acceptance and speed. And that doesn't only apply to the public good or public sector, it really applies everywhere. So we'll be working with these two things. The way we address the challenge is we've set up this new model for a national resource to use the science parks because they are neutral, and that all the universities can be a member there. So there doesn't have to be any competition. We can actually collaborate that way. And we set it up as a public-private partnership. We've been using proxy data, and I haven't talked much about that, but that's something we used in the test facilities. And what we found was that instead of using human lungs and human EKGs and so forth, using animal data just to test the hardware was really useful. So we can do the training on, let's say, images of pig lungs or cat lungs or something to just see, does this work? How does this algorithm work? Does this way of setting up a federated learning network work? And while we do that and test all the hardware here, the hospitals can go through all their ethics reviews and so forth. So by the time the ethics reviews are ready, hopefully we've already solved the hardware problem, and then they can retrain it on human data in a compliant way. So proxy data has been a really good way to go. The idea of building your own strength, we don't sell anything from here. We are available. So that way the companies and the public organizations have to come here and work by themselves. That's really much better than somebody else doing it for them. So we've had people from the tax authority and now from the data protection agency and others come here and work here actually on site. And we do the transformation support. And we have a really small organization, generally speaking, about 50 people nationwide to facilitate. That's what we do. We help them on getting on board. And key lessons learned, neutral platform is really important. Investing together and sharing, it works. It's a little bit of a hurdle in the beginning, but once people get over it, it's extremely powerful. Focusing on the speed is really good because people understand that not always can the traditional protection things work if you want to go fast? You don't have time for all these steps, but instead go in and collaborate on non-competing things to the level where you have the understanding you need. Then you can go home and behind your own walls develop what you need. And be brave. We are getting pretty good at taking some risks of failure, I should say. That we don't know when we start things always if it's going to work or not. But if it doesn't work, we'll learn and we'll stop it, and then we'll do something different. So that's concludes my active presentation. And I'm going to hand back to you there for questions and so forth.
Thank you very, very much, Mats. That's been wonderful. I want to say to people, if they have a pressing question and I have lost the link to Mentimeter, they can still log on and take a pen, use the code 2901 4584. I repeat, 2901 4584. And apologies in advance, we probably won't be able to answer all questions. We'll do our best and we'll try to stay within the scope of this presentation. So I'll start here with a question that pertains to the public sector. Have you had to deal with the fact that some AI solutions may be of the black box kind, and how do the public organizations deal with that when you need to have explainable solutions?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to recognize that you can't completely give the decision power to an AI today, partly because we can't always certify how it's going to perform. It's not always possible to explain either before or afterwards how it's going to perform. So what we tell people is that use AI as a tool and think about it as that people who use AI will replace people who don't use AI. But AI itself today is not mature for the most part, to replace people completely. So it's a good advising tool, but at the end of the day, it's the human who has the decision power and has the responsibility for the final decision or the final. But the AI can do a lot of preparatory work and can do a lot of mundane work, if you will, to help advise the human, but it can't replace, at least not today.
Thank you very much. You mentioned certifications, and there was a question in Menti about what you think. What's the place of certifications or certification agencies? Do you see a role for them in going forward, especially maybe for the public sector or in industry applications?
I worked a lot with certifications in my past on traditional technology, so I have a background interacting with certification agencies for sure. So I understand the question. The question is what it is that we want to certify, I suppose. And I think it's obviously an excellent question to ask. And you can certify a whole bunch of different things. You can certify ways that companies develop. Their development processes can be certified. You can certify the end products to some level. You can certify it, I think, within the scope. You can say for this particular use, what they call the envelope, it is certified. So if you look, for example, how the automotive industry is starting to roll out cars, they don't release the cars for every application at once. They say that, okay, we will allow, let's say, driving only in traffic jams for the beginning because it's slow and it's controlled and it's not a whole bunch of things going on. And then step by step, they will open it up. So I think that now also going forward, there will be a lot of concerns around the privacy and so forth. And I have definitely a feeling that there's going to have to be a balance between what is possible for the companies to certify themselves, that they can say and should take the responsibility that our product is certified by self-certified, essentially CE marked, whatever you want to call it, or meet certain standards. But you can also then use a public sector certification on, for example, one of the key issues here comes down to data, that have they used a sufficiently broad data set so that it doesn't produce a biased some kind of bias in the outcome of the AI. So I can't give you a straight answer to, they should certify this, that, and the other, because it's all the time here now emerging and the technology is changing so fast. But I think the key thing for both public sector and private is to say, we are sure, or we can prove that with a certain degree of safety, because you can't mathematically today prove, like you can with some other technology, that with a certain degree of reliability, it will perform this way. And many times it will be better than humans. We have seen in many areas that AI actually outperforms humans, but it doesn't get it always completely right. But humans don't either.
That's true. I think you've answered part of the question, but I'm still going to ask it, given the context that we're in the public sector, how do you engage with the kommuner and regions? Do they, I think you have a special community for them, but do you facilitate sharing there of experience as well?
Yes, yeah, they're quite active here. Many both towns or we call them kommuner, cities, are quite active here by themselves. I gave you one example here of Helsingborg, who have, I would say, it's one of the most active, but there are others that are quite active too. And they have themselves taken an initiative. They've come here and used us as a platform to reach out to other towns. And then using federated learning or this lab that I showed you, the commune, we can put one computer in one of the cities and another computer in another city. They can train locally on their data, and then we can merge or federate that data so that you get the similar kind of outcome as you could see with the hospital example there with the lungs, for example. So what we do is we say we're available. We don't sell anything, so we don't go out and try to actively sell certain services, but we instead have seminars, webinars, send out information, and use quite a bit of word of mouth, because it's so much more powerful if people come in and say, I'm curious, I want to learn more, than if you go out and try to sell them something they're not sure if they even want.
Somebody is asking if you can say more about the assessment tool for AI readiness. And I think we can link it to the cultural change and probably attitude towards innovation that's needed.
Yes, yeah, it was developed by a German institute or lab, and we have a link to it on our website. I'll provide that. So I would say that the best thing is to just go in there and take a look at that. And there should be links there also to our German colleagues, where they also presented a little bit more. And it's I've taken the course on that, and I'm always very skeptical of things, but this one is actually very good. So I clearly recommend it. If you want to check it out yourself, I see if I can put it in the chat here, a link to it for somebody who wants to go and check it. It's a little bit more information available on that link there.
It's on AI.se, because our listeners can't see the chat, but it's under AI transformation, right? Yeah. So yes, so if you want to learn more, go to AI.se and AI transformation. I had a more technical question about distributed learning, because obviously with tons of data and sensitive data and health data, that's probably the way to go. Do you experiment with data privacy protocols, different techniques to preserve privacy and data? Yes,
we do. And as I mentioned, we have started this collaboration now in the summer exchange program with Mad Labs in Madison Cyber Labs in the US. And we have right now a group of 5 students, so graduate students, a couple of PhD students, and a couple of master students who are addressing exactly that. So they are looking at a whole bunch of aspects, and this is the first step we're doing in that direction. And we said, let's just start that right now so we can get it going. But we anticipate this expanding quite a bit here in the fall and in the spring. And we are open for everybody. So if somebody at your side here is interested, they're just approach us, and then, as we said, invest together and share with many is sort of the way we do it.
Do you see challenges that are specific to the public sector, or particular hurdles that you have to solve or address? Apart from lacking infrastructure sometimes, or also a big demand for a different kind of privacy?
There are certainly regulatory differences between the public sector and the private sector in many ways. But it turns out what we've seen is that many times even the public sector organizations have been able to carve out experimental sandboxes, if you want, perhaps you can call it, so that within traditional structures they struggle to make progress. But moving into setting up some kind of a sandbox structure within the agency or within the town or within the region seems to be a good way to enable that. And then we can use, as I indicated, proxy data. So instead of using real patient data, well, we can do all the experiments here using, let's say, animal data or something else, just to understand how does this work, will this solve our problem, and so forth. So taking an unconventional approach and also working a lot with students, because students are quite creative and they can do things that many of us older people cannot even think of. So that's been a good way to go forward.
You did mention your supercomputer. Do you have it on site? And maybe I'm going to link it to another question. How critical do you think it's been that you've embarked on this, not only together with the government, but also industrial partners? Do you think you could have done it without them?
No, I don't think so. Because what we've done is we've done changes to the AI ecosystem. And when you do change the AI ecosystem, what you will see is that some of the incumbent actors, people who were part of the AI system or organization, I should say, who were part of the AI ecosystem when we started this, have found themselves in new roles. And it's important that everybody understands this, because not everybody is comfortable with that kind of role change. So it's important that we have a very broad understanding, a very broad discussion to understand what people need, how they feel about these changes, what they can contribute now, and make sure that all that is addressed to the best we can, of course.
I also I was wondering, for the test bed and your lab, if I get it right, it's usually first a POC. Have you gone into implementation? Do you help them there as well, or do you stop at the POC? What's your involvement in later steps to really increase value then?
Well, what we do is, remember I had a slide where I had a yellow and a blue circle around themselves. So what we do here is we work with people to the end, if you want to call it a POC or what we call demonstrator or a prototype. We can work with them there. Once they're at that end, they need to go into the commercial space, because there needs to be value generated both for the person who wants the AI, but also for the companies and others who sell this equipment and provides the data. So at that case, we don't sell anything. So we typically encourage consulting companies or others or startups to be here, and then they can continue into the commercial bubble and work there with them and help them on. And of course, if they want to come back here for additional experiments because things don't work as they thought, then they of course welcome back here. But the actual commercial development and the final steps of the product development needs to be taken in the normal commercial way, so that we don't violate any of the government support rules and things like that.
I see. I think we find similar challenges in many of our organizations. I think, yeah, I thought you had. I was naively thinking that health data in Sweden was more unified and more easily accessible than it was in Switzerland. But from our conversation, I realized not quite. It's quite siloed, right? Even and accessing health data spread across
it has
regions.
To be, and I think for good reason.
True. Yes. I think the
question
use
is
of
how to overcome that, and
yep. Sorry.
That's what we've been trying to do here, to overcome. So it has to be siloed, I think, for all sort of good reasons, including like data breaches. If somebody is able to hack in, that you don't want them to access the entire country's health records and so forth, but maybe limit the damage by just accessing a certain part of it. And also, if you were then attacked, let's say by a ransomware attack, that you don't lose the entire system or whatnot. So So there are good reasons from robustness point of view, security point of view, to keep it that way. But at the same time, as I said, it's kind of a paradox. You have all this data and you want to use all this data, but you can't. So then how do you solve that? And that's what we're experimenting with here now on this Edge Learning Lab.
Looks very promising, and I think we're going to end with okay, so we've been speaking about data science and mainly AI for public good. We've been asked in Menti what will be the best starting point. I think you seem to start from use cases from needs bottom up, or are there areas that you think are should be a priority?
In terms of applications, I think there are, the public sector has a lot of really good application areas. So healthcare, not least, is one area where you can provide tools to physicians and to nurses and others to help them with diagnostics, especially. I think that's a very, it's not just sort of a dream. This is actually being done already, and it's being done very successfully. And they have seen results where the AI-based diagnostics tools now are outperforming humans, or they're at least as good as or better than human doctors. They never get tired, and they have a very broad knowledge of all sort of different diseases that perhaps a physician only see once in their lifetime and so forth. So generally speaking, that is a very promising area. And then you have, of course, the policing area, the forensics and tracking of all sort of criminal activities, not least financial crimes, where you can work with banks and they can train on different types of money transaction flows and money flows that are unusual. It's very good at recognizing patterns, AI-based solutions. So there's a lot of really useful help that you can do. Plus also in education, diagnosing students. Some people who have a letter combination like ADHD or some other learning disability can be diagnosed very accurately with some of the new tools that are coming out, and then it can tailor learning curricula for on an individual basis in a very good way. So it's a whole bunch of quite good things that one can look at. That's already available.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your lessons learned in these. It's not even 3 years. I think you've done heaps, and we at least from our side I look forward to future exchanges if you will.
That'd be great. Yeah, just let us know if you're interested in learning more. Check into this my.ai.se or just check our website or contact us.
We will, and I wish you a very, very nice weekend. Thanks again, Mats, for being with us today. Tack så mycket och ha en bra helg.
Same to you, and have a great weekend this weekend.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye now.
Tack så mycket. Hej.